Welcome to the top CMS tools are working together to build a more inclusive world, improving the authoring experience. This is a workshop given by Susanna Lauren and Mike Gifford. Susanna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hi everyone. My name is Susanna Lauren. I am the Chief Research and Innovation Officer at a small consultancy in Europe called Funka. We are experts in accessibility, and I do a lot of work for the European Commission on regulations and standards, but mostly within the research projects, such as one of them we are going to present today.
Wonderful. And I'm Mike Gifford. I'm a Drupal core accessibility maintainer. I was previously the CEO of Open Concept, but I'm now with Civic Actions, still doing work on accessibility, but now with a larger team, and happy to present here once again at DrupalCon.
So as we are from two different companies, we will present both of them shortly, and I won't do this at length, but I think it's interesting. Our background at Funka, we were started in the mid-90s by the joint disability organizations in Sweden. And for those of you who are not in Europe, Sweden is not the place where the Alps and the chocolate, it's the other country up in the north. But this was an NGO, and really all the disability organizations, they understood that the internet won't go away. We might as well do something good for our people. So that's how it all started, and we're very happy that we then were created into a privately owned company in the year 2000. And since then, we are doing performing consulting in accessibility and also what we still call usability. And we're also developing systems that work for everyone with guaranteed accessibility. So in that respect, we are kind of normal, like most ICT companies, I guess, but we also have a research and innovation department. Around 20% of the turnover of the company comes from research funding. So that is quite special, I think, for a small company. We also do a lot of policy work and studies for the Commission and the national governments in Europe mainly. And we are also, of course, active in standardization. And I hear a funny beep, but let's hope that goes away. Yep.
Yes, I hope the beep goes away as well. Civic Actions was founded in the open source movement and is very grounded in the work of open source and open data. It's a private company since 2004 and has started initially with campaigns, but has moved to the nonprofit sector and also does a lot of work with government agencies, both in the United States and outside of the United States. The Civic Actions is known for doing work with security and agile development, and we're also now working a lot more with accessibility. There's also an open data wing for Civic Actions. There's the DCAN project is an open data repository that is managed by the Civic Actions team. So I wanted to first of all remind people who may or may not be familiar with Drupal and ATAG and the work that we've been doing around accessibility to start this presentation off. Drupal 7 did a lot of work to upgrade its accessibility and to ensure that we were on both the front end and the back end, that we were trying to meet the basic requirements of WCAG 2.0 AA. We wanted to make sure that the content was perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And it was really important for us to make sure that wasn't something that was just visible for the users, but administrators and authors and editors would also be able to engage with the interface. And this was a huge initiative and was one that really set Drupal apart back with Drupal 7. With Drupal 8, we started to look at ways to improve it, and at that point, ATAG 2.0 had been released, and we were looking at ways to incorporate some of the best practices that were described in the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines, which is yet another World Wide Web Consortium standard. We wanted to incorporate that into the Drupal content management system and make that part of core. And we had already done most of part A of ATAG, which is to make sure that the backend interface could be used by people with disabilities. But we wanted to look at part B, which was to actually improve the authoring interface to see that it would be it would make it easier for authors to make accessible content. We realized that there was a problem with the content management systems not necessarily helping their users and assuming that users are going to be accessibility experts. And we realized that we could make changes and improvements in the user interface to make sure that we were assisting our authors to help make accessible choices. So we made a number of enhancements for authors that helped with accessibility. The big one was that we required alt text for images. So both in CK Editor and in the image field, alt text are required by default. You can turn that off, but by default, we wanted to make sure that when you're adding images that we were following the best practices, and it wasn't something you needed to go back and rethink when you were reviewing the content. We also added spell check so that the authors were supported in creating content that would be more easily read by screen readers, or for that matter, people who have learning disabilities or are dealing with a second language. We also built in help text. We wanted to make sure that we were exposing the accessibility features that we had worked so hard to put into the authoring interface, because there are times that it's not intuitive for people how to create, what features are available, and how they can use those features to improve their content. And again, that's all part of ATAG 2.0 Part B. We've also in the top right-hand side of the slide here have an example of the language of parts widget that we've added. And this is something that's still actually a little bit hidden within Drupal, but there are times that content authors need to go and include content that's in another language than the dominant language of the web page. And this is a widget that allows you to identify that language as being, English, French, German, Russian. It allows you to pick and choose how what language this other text is being written in. And it really helps for screen readers in particular to be able to make sure that they're pronouncing the phrases correctly, and they're not trying to pronounce French text with an English dictionary set. We also included accessible table support and removed H1 from the WYSIWYG editor, which is CK Editor. So we couldn't see any reason why there would be an H1 tag needed within the body of the text, and so we just removed that from as an option for the authors. Susanna? Sorry. We also we didn't through this whole process, we didn't have the opportunity to test with authors. We didn't have clear best practices to follow. There's a challenge with A/B testing that again, we didn't have the opportunity within the Drupal process to do A/B testing, and we also didn't have external reviews. The Drupal process is extensive, but there are definitely places where there's a limited time and effort that people can put into building these interfaces, and there were things that we weren't able to accomplish in the time that we had.
And now it's me.
Yes.
So,
sorry.
From the European perspective, we are living in very exciting times, because we have been in a world where we have had sort of soft recommendations on accessibility, and in most member states, we didn't have legal requirements. But during the last couple of years, we have had not least than 3 directives, which is regulations on EU language on web accessibility. So first was the procurement directive that is not highly relevant here, but the big thing happened was when the Web Accessibility Directive entered into force. And really this has been a lot in focus, because since the 23rd of September of this year, all public sector authorities' websites, documents need to be accessible. And this is for many web authors in the public sector, maybe the first time that they really that they need to do this. They know that accessibility exists and that this is something important, but now it's a legal requirement. So this is something completely new. Also, we have now a second directive, which is called an act, but it is formally a directive, the European Accessibility Act, which also covers some products and services in the private sector. But that legislation will come a little bit later. So we are still focusing on public sector, but in Europe, public sector is really big. So this means that we now have around 7 million websites, nobody really knows, but approximately 7 million websites that are covered by these regulations and must comply with the EN 301-549 standard. So we have a European standard for web access. And this in turn means that we have many more millions of web authors that need to create content in an accessible way. And at least at the local level, we do see many governments that they probably have 50 web authors, but they can also have 200 or 500 web authors, because this is usually a very democratic process. And many of these people are not even trained to be communication people. They have another profession, but they're also allowed or required to publish things. So of course, you can't ask these people to be experts in accessibility. It's just not possible. And also, even if we are accessibility experts and we love to train people, we just can't grow fast enough and recruit enough people to be able to train all these millions and millions and millions of web authors. That just won't scale. So next slide, please. Our research also shows that actually more than 50% of the accessibility fails that we see when we do audits on websites are created by, well, surprise, humans, and then mostly web authors. So what we did like 8 or 10 years ago, we were very focused on the technical checklists, and we were focusing very much on the developers and making sure that they did all the technical standards in a good way. And accessibility was a lot about technology. But these days, most generic ICT suppliers, they know the basics of accessibility. So if you have a reasonably modern website, then these sort of hygiene, basic accessibility things are okay. And what we really need to focus on now are the authors, because it's not because they're evil, but they simply don't know accessibility enough. So we have a big problem here if we want to make sure that the websites are accessible. Next slide. So we got this idea that maybe we should change the focus. Instead of trying to train all these people, I mean, we still need to do that, but we have to have a better idea on how to make this work. So what if we could pinpoint the tools? So go to the source, so to speak, and make sure that the accessibility could be built in from the start. So when I, as an author, when I publish something, it could be, ta-da, magically accessible without me being an expert. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? And if we could go to the moon, why couldn't we make authoring tools make automatic accessibility? That should be possible. If that isn't possible, then at least the authoring tools could be much more supportive and really help the authors to do the right thing. Maybe nudge them in the right direction, or just providing the good examples as Mike showed in Drupal. So that could be much more done in a more structured way, and make sure that all, not only Drupal, but all authoring tools are doing that. So with this idea, we went to the Commission and lobbied for the possibility to have a project on this. And we were successful in getting funded for firstly a pilot. Usually in European research funding, you get a pilot first, and then you have the possibility, if you succeed with your pilot, then you can perform the sort of real research. So in the piloting, the idea is to prove your point, or prove that your thesis is important enough to go on with. So you need to show that there's a potential in this idea, and really make sure that if we just get the opportunity to perform this project, then we can make something good happen. So what we did was gathering a lot of user requirements from web authors from across Europe. And then we crawled a lot of EU public sector websites to see which are those the most used authoring tools in Europe in public sector. Because if we can get the biggest ones or the most popular ones to do good things, then most likely the rest of the market will follow. That was the idea. And you can find the results of this first pilot project at www.funka.com/we4authors. So we with a number 4 authors. And I think you will also have this, this presentation afterwards. You can find the link.
Yes. So surprise, surprise, Drupal's #1. So of 832 European government websites that were surveyed, the most popular was Drupal. And here's a listing, a table listing that indicates the relative percentage. And it's lovely to see that over 25% of the websites evaluated were using Drupal. The countries that Drupal was #1 included Belgium, which is not too surprising with Dries, but Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Denmark, Estonia, yay, Estonia, France, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, the Netherlands, and of course, the United Kingdom. So the other interesting thing of this list is that half of the top 10 CMSs were under an open source license, and that they're like with there's a certain amount of competition between the open source communities, but there's also a real desire to share and collaborate and to learn and to build best tools, best approaches together. So it was lovely to be able to reach out to people who were in these other communities and to work with them and find ways to engage. And so this is a listing of the We4Authors cluster. Suzanne, do you want to outline this?
Yeah, it's a lovely picture. So we then created this cluster of market leading companies, and the idea of the project really was to make sure we use, or we base the research on the user needs that we collected in the first phase, and then we tried to collaborate with market players to make sure that whatever ideas we have is also technically feasible so that they can be implemented in authoring tools. That is extremely important. I mean, we are accessibility experts, but we don't create authoring tools. So we need the real specialists to have a big impact. And we promised to create at least 10 new features. They can be based on old ideas, but they should be new in a sense that they are innovative. So features that really help and support web authors to do the right thing. And we also promised to do extensive user testing to really make sure that web authors that have a background in accessibility and web authors that don't know anything about accessibility, working in small places, large organizations, and so on, really a broad holistic perspective, that they all benefit from this, so that the features that we present to the world are really well, really based on the author's needs, and that they also work, they should be user-friendly and really make a difference. They, of course, should be validated technically, and also we need to do user testing with end users with disabilities, so that the result of using these features is also making sure that something is compliant on the other side, so to speak. But the idea is to test the features. First, we need to agree on which ones are more prioritized, and then test them in different technical surroundings. And then the results of this will be shared with the community, so free for everyone to use. So hopefully more, not only the partners in the project, but also the rest of the market will use these features and use it as a unique selling point or competitive advantage in their products.
So the leading software communities that are involved include Drupal, Plone, Joomla, Umbraco, TinyMCE, and SiteVision. And I've been representing the Drupal community in this process, and it's been especially useful to talk with people in Plone and Joomla and Umbraco and get a sense of the struggles that they are dealing with as other open source development companies. There are different issues that you need to deal with when you're working to build a general solution. And how do we make sure that we're balancing the needs, not just of accessibility, but also of performance and of usability and for that matter, security and privacy as well. So it's a wonderful way to go and to learn and to exchange ideas and best practices with these other communities.
And I think it's also interesting that, sorry, but the SiteVision here is maybe not as known as the others, absolutely not as big, but it's a licensed product. And as you may know, the authoring tools are usually very regional. That's also something we found in the research, that in some regions that really one player or two maybe are really used a lot, and then in other regions nobody knows about them. So it's really a very fragmented market. And SiteVision is in the Nordic countries have a very large proportion of the public sector market, and it is important from the sort of the balance of the project that we are not only having representation from the open source community, but also a licensed product. And I think that is also a strength of this, the idea of building a cluster, not only to share knowledge among the open source communities, but also that we have a commercial licensed product in the consortium. I think that is really showing the strength of this idea of, or this concept of working together in this way. And it's also, we didn't know how these market players would react when we put them in the same room. Now it's an online room, of course, but still, I think it's really wonderful to see how they share ideas, and the competition is going on somewhere else and not in the project, and that's really a benefit, I think, for the result of the project as well.
Absolutely, it's nice to have different perspectives and to have a broader collection of tools that are working together for a common goal. Yeah. So the selected features that we're looking at include alt text, and that's partly in terms of making it required, but also looking at help text and how do we make sure that we're helping to ensure that the authors are given guidance about how to create alt text. I've created an issue queue for the Drupal community on this that for areas where we can improve for Drupal 9. I'd love to see that be brought into core and have something where we're providing more direction for authors to create meaningful alt text. There's also the ability to change language. That's the language of parts requirement that I highlighted earlier in the presentation. There's also documentation, looking at tables and ensuring that we're creating accessible tables. The form editor is another one where again we want to be able to give authors the ability to create accessible forms, as well as support them in uploading videos, and that they were able to help them with that as well. We also see that a big part of this is testing, and this is something that there are a couple different options to do this in Drupal and in other platforms, but it's not something that has been really embraced in the way that I was hoping that it would. So you can test in the WYSIWYG editor. And in Drupal, that's CK Editor, and there's a plugin that you can add for CK Editor that unfortunately is using some old JavaScript code, so I don't recommend that. But then there's another tool that's based on the HTML code sniffer tool, and again, there may be issues with how much content is provided through that. So, but again, we're looking at, in this test, we're looking at how do we ideally not looking at the tools that are available now and the struggles that Drupal is dealing with, but how do we try to make sure that we're outlining an ideal best practice that we can all strive for. What should it look like? What would help an author in terms of having that immediate feedback when they're creating content? The other is notifying people when they upload documents. How do we notify people if there are accessibility issues that are detected when documents are being uploaded? Also, often the CK editor is just or the WYSIWYG editor is just part of the page. it's important to be able to evaluate the whole page. So how do we incorporate a full page checker inside the CMS to, again, give the author ability to view their content within the context of the page. And finally, there's also the need to look at the whole site and to have a site-wide perspective that gives authors and publishers the ability to look over their site and get a sense of where there are problems and where they can improve, and make sure that that is something that is exposed to the authors so that they can learn how to improve the content and make sure that that's as easy as possible for them to process.
And the selection criteria was a combination of what the web authors told us were most important to them, and then the issues where they had most problems. So the parts, for example, tables creation and forms creation was where they claimed that this was the most difficult part to make it accessible. And also where end users claim to have the most problems. So it was a combination of different criteria and needs from different perspectives that ended up or resulted in this list of selected features. So this is what we have now been working on. So sorry, next slide. We are not claiming to solve all the world's problem with this project, but it has been promoted a lot by the European Commission. They are impressed by what we're doing. And I think, again, that is partly because we are sort of two things. We are going to the source of the problem, and we are also having this broad market outreach, which is very rare, unfortunately. So I do still think this is the result of this project can be a very important part of the solution for making sure that we move towards an inclusive society and more accessible websites. If, or should I say, when we succeed in this and make sure that the rest of the markets also use the features when we release them, which will happen this spring, next spring, we will have an impact on trying to avoid unnecessary mistakes. So if non-experts are really getting support in making it right without being experts, without being too much trained, then I think we will see that a lot of the accessibility problems or issues that we see today will be reduced. So having accessibility by default is not only interesting, I think, for web authoring tools, but it's also kind of a concept or a methodology that could be used in many other tools and software as well. So hopefully this can also spread further on. And we have been speaking, for example, about e-learning platforms, LMS, and other tools like that could use maybe some of the features that we create, or at least get inspired by the work we have done and come up with new ideas for their markets. I work a lot with procurement, and I think that is really a key issue to make sure that public sector bodies do the right thing. And it's also a very good way to sort of drive the market in good directions. So I'm also hoping, and we are trying to make sure we reach out to the right people to make this happen, and that some of the more brave governments in Europe will use the features as award criteria or selection criteria for framework contracts, meaning that they either promote authoring tools that use the features, or that it's mandatory to use the features, so that in the future this will be sort of the normal business as usual, state of the art. It's sort of what you do if you're a serious authoring tool provider, then you should have at least some of these basic features included. So that would be the sort of end goal, and then we can all retire, because when this is fixed, experts can focus on more interesting issues or more complex issues. That goes for accessibility experts, of course. We are all kind of bored with telling people to write alt texts, but also the web authors can focus on what they are good at, which is creating content, and the developers and designers and UXers and producers of authoring tools can also do what they do best, instead of just trying to remediate these easy things all the time. So I really think this could be having a big impact or disrupting this market. I see that potential, at least. And we do have 23, I think, projects in parallel here, and I don't say that of all of them. So I do really think that this is a special project. I'm very, very proud of being part of it. So next slide.
So there definitely are going to be huge benefits for the Drupal community. Being part of this allows us to share problems, ideas, wireframes, and even code with other teams. And I think that this is a great way for us to learn from each other and to test ideas with government authors, which are not the only user base that matters for Drupal websites, but certainly there's a lot of government agencies that use Drupal and depend on it, and it is an important vertical for our community. And just the ability to engage with a group of authors like this is something that I think we can really benefit from, because there aren't many ways for us to reach out across through the web designers and whatnot that we work with to actually reach the needs of the authors. It also gives us the ability to look for evidence-based decision making, where we don't, looking at Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 in the core process, we've looked for as much evidence to back up our decisions as we can, but we haven't had access to an analysis like this about, well, what is actually helping authors? What do authors want? And how can we help encapsulate that so that they are able to have it as good an interface as they possibly can. We're also able to look at testing the outcomes between different content management systems. As much as we want people to all follow the same patterns, there are inevitably going to be differences between how Joomla or SiteVision or Plone implement these solutions, and we should be able to in a few years' time evaluate what solutions are the most effective to removing errors for accessibility. It's interesting, in all of our work to actually make alt text required in Drupal 8. We don't have any stats on how many websites actually are still holding with that, and how many of them have overwritten the requirement for alt text, or for that matter, if the websites themselves are actually producing more accessible websites because the work that we've done under A tag. Hopefully, with this site-wide survey that we're able to over time gain more knowledge and confidence that the improvements that we're making to the authoring tools are helping with accessibility. I also wanted to add that the technology itself is changing over time, as are the standards. The EN 301549 is based on, the latest one is looking essentially the equivalent of WCAG 2.1 AA in terms of the WCAG implementation. Most people will be more familiar with WCAG 2.0 AA because that's been around for a longer period of time. It's possible that in the next year or two, the harmonized European standard will embrace the WCAG 2.2 AA standard and keep up with the best practices that are recommended by the Web Accessibility Initiative of the World Wide Web Consortium. But we don't, and this is a tool that can really help our authors keep up if we're able to invest in improving the way that we're able to support our authors, and we're not going to need to have our authors keep up with all of the changes that are happening in the within the web standard community. Oops, and hang on a second. So, Susanna?
Yeah, so we are right now in the process of doing these extensive user testing. So we have prototypes of these 10 features that we want to test. Most of them are A/B testing, but we really need more people to do the tests. We have a good chunk of people who are interested and really doing the testing with us. We have done some piloting, and now I think it's actually today we are releasing the tests. So please, if you are interested in authoring, and you don't have to be public sector staff from the EU, we are happy to reach out to all web authors, of course. But it would be extremely valuable for us if you would like to share your knowledge and experience with us It takes less than an hour to test all the features. It's very exciting, of course, and you will learn a lot about accessibility and maybe get some new ideas and inspiration for your own work, who knows. So the testing address is long, but it's www.funka.com/en/accessibility-test. And we also have more information about the actual project if you're interested in that at the website accessibilitycluster.com. And I think both Mike and I agree that we hope for this cluster to live on beyond the project. Maybe there are more projects to come as well, but we really want to make sure that this network of people continue working in the future to do more good things together. And I think this is the end of our presentation because my voice is closing down.
I also love to add that if people are connected with other content management solutions where or publishing tools that they're engaged with, that there are opportunities to get involved, and hopefully there'll be opportunities to expand the list of CMS communities that are engaged in this, because I think that this is something that should grow, and we should have broader best practices that we're applying for every tool that's creating content on the web. So thanks again, everyone, for listening. You can reach us at mike.gifford@civicactions.com or susanna.lauren@funka.com, and we're happy to have questions if there are any questions from the audience.
Hello. Congratulations, Susanna and Mike, for your presentation. And we have, at the moment, one question from the audience. It's from Truls. And the question says, I am just curious how accessible are you doing for deaf or hard of hearing people? Have you done something with caption solution directly on CMS? To be honest, I don't really understand the first part of the question. If you could elaborate a bit more, please, Truls.
I think the question is, I mean, for us from Funka, we are doing a lot of work on both sign language and captioning, and we cover all the user needs or all disability groups in the work we do. In this specific project, there are no the features that we have chosen or selected, they are not specifically covering captioning or hard of hearing perspective, so to speak. But really the video part, of course, is covering both captions and audio description. But really it's more of a technical issue and not sort of, it's not enhancing the outcome of these issues or functionality, but the video part is of course also covering captioning. And the testing part, I mean, all the tests will of course also cover all the success criteria.
Yeah. Okay.
It is interesting in terms of the web. It is such a visual medium that often people forget the deaf and hard of hearing community. And I think that there's a few websites that we've built for organizations in Canada that have had ASL or QSL support built into that, and I think it's a great precedent to have that, and to have websites that are constructed so that people, if ASL or QSL is their first language, that the content is available for them in that format, and that should be something that's easier to do, and when people are constructing videos. But again, it's not something that people generally think about when they're looking at web accessibility. It is often an afterthought, unfortunately.
There's also a very interesting research project now funded by the EU Commission. It's starting Q1 next year, where the goal is to build an app or something, a tool that translates between all the EU official EU languages, spoken languages, back and forth to all the EU sign languages. So if they succeed, that will be a major step forward for deaf and hard of hearing people in Europe.
That's amazing, and hopefully those tools will be available outside of Europe as well for people for the broader community.
I'm sure they will. But the focus is on the EU official languages. So, but 27 languages, 27 spoken and 27 signed languages it's kind of an effort. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, we have no more questions. Only 3 minutes left. So, yeah, maybe if you want to add something at the end, it's okay.
Yeah, maybe we can add that we have had a lot of interest also from other communities. We did a presentation on the project on the WordPress Accessibility Day. So the WordPress is not part of this officially, but they're very interested in following what we're doing. And also the other top 10 or so CMS that are on the sort of the top list in Europe. They are, many of them also follow the project. And as we have TinyMCE on board, they found us from Australia, which was interesting. So I think there's a demand for this, and it's really interesting to see all the different ideas coming from the different parts of this community. So I think there is a strength in this way of working together that makes me really believe in those ideas. And we will have a workshop or online event in May, probably. We didn't have the date yet finished, but we will present all the results of the project to the wider community. So stay tuned if you want to make sure not to miss out on all the interesting things that is really happening. This is what I hope will be the next generation authoring tool support for web authors.
That's wonderful. And yeah, we really need more effort looking at the authoring interface and finding ways to make it easier for content authors to publish content with confidence. So hopefully we'll see many more efforts to work together to make it easier for everyone to do that.
Yeah, and another sort of step 2 of this, or step 3 maybe, is of course to look more at the back end of this. So to make sure that the authoring tools are also accessible for people with disabilities to become web authors, because that doesn't really work that well in all contexts right now. So that would be a natural next step for us as well to look further into that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, and hopefully you've enjoyed your DrupalCon this year.
Yeah, sure, we did. So thanks a lot for your presentation, and yeah, see you around. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.